A couple months ago, the Pope was visited the U.S. Anybody remember that? Anybody see this story? It wasn't on the news very long. It came down pretty quick. But so when the Pope went down to Philadelphia from New York, right? And when they moved him down to Philly, they drove him. They had the Pope mobile waiting down in Philly for him, so they drove him down. And so this car service showed up for the Pope, a great young Catholic American sitting behind the wheel, and "Oh, Your Eminence," greeted the Pope. "It's so awesome to see you, and anything I could do to make your ride more enjoyable, let me know." And the Pope looked at the young man and said, "Really?" He goes, "Yes, Your Eminence." And he goes, "Cool, let me drive." And he goes, "Oh, Your Eminence, I can't do that." He goes, "Son, they never let me drive. Please let me drive." And he goes, "Okay, Your Eminence, let's." So the Pope gets behind the wheel, mistake, starts the car, puts it in gear, foot to the floor, gone. Right as he's coming into Philly, he was doing 120 and a 55. You guys didn't see this on the news? So gets pulled over, right? The lights come on, it pulls the car over, the cop's pissed. 120 and 55. Man, this ain't, he's muttering as he's walking up to the door, "This ain't no ticket, this guy's going to jail." He's going to jail. Knocks on the window rolls down, sees the Pope. Again, another young Catholic man says, "Oh, Your Eminence, wait here, please. I got to make a radio call." And he goes back to his car. He goes, "Hey, I need to speak to the chief of police." And dispatch is like, "No, you don't." He goes, "Yes, I do." They're like, "Why? What do you got going on?" He goes, "Well, there was a guy. I pulled a guy over. He's doing 120 and a 55. They're like, "Simple. Arrest him. Bring him in." He goes, "No, you don't understand. There's somebody pretty powerful in the car." And they go, "What, like the mayor?" He goes, "No, more powerful than the mayor." "Are we talking the governor? The governor's in the car." He goes, "No, more powerful than the governor." And he goes, "What, the President of the United States?" He goes, "Look, I don't really know who's in the car, but the Pope is his driver." Power, authority changes people, changes reactions, changes relationships, right? Changes your relationships, changes how people act around you and how you act around people. Changed how our young officer, he went from throwing the guy under the jail to, "Oh man, I don't know who's in the back seat, but the Pope driving him around." Right? Power and authority. If we want to build environments characterized by commitment, loyalty, and trust, that's the goal, because that makes us better leaders. And I'm going to tell you why it makes us better leaders right after lunch, or while you're eating your lunch for that matter, okay? It will make sense to you why we think commitment, loyalty, and trust is so important. You got to understand then what can defeat that. Before we can start going down the road of how to build that, we got to understand what barriers get in the way of commitment, loyalty, and trust, okay? And one of them is very simply the position you're sitting in. Power and authority, okay? Power and authority. What are you excellent at? What are you excellent at? I don't want to brag, and those in the room that have flown with me may refute this, but I felt like I was a pretty excellent pilot when I was younger, right? And the reason that I know the Air Force thought that is because I never would have got a chance to command, and I never would have got a chance to 06 command if I wasn't good at my primary job, right? Would you guys all agree? And that's how it works, right? If you're not good at your primary job, you're not going to get a chance for leadership, okay? But by the time I became a group commander, do you think anyone in my group cared what kind of pilot I was? If I was excellent as a pilot? Maybe the guy sitting in the seat next to me in the airplane, he cared, right? But no one else cared. I had to be credible, but I needed to stop being excellent at flying. What did I need to start to be excellent at? What's that?
So we were talking we've seen multiple examples of leadership that horrible pilots and terrible leaders.
Wow. For the most part, you can't get there if you're a poor pilot. You start busting check rides, you don't get a chance to go to school, you don't get, so.
When I say they busted check rides, because the lieutenant gets a current lieutenant colonel like
check ride, well, so we got a professionalism problem right there, right? But by the time I'm a colonel, group commander, what do I need to be excellent at? Leadership. At what? People, right? What are you excellent at? Everyone in this room is a leader, a formal leader in our Air Force, right? We got commanders, we got chiefs, we got master sergeants, we got colonels. Everyone in this room, what are you excellent at? Are you excellent at people? Or are you still excellent at the other badge hanging on your uniform? Okay. Excellence. Here's what we think about excellence.
When we told people we were in the Air Force, they always asked, "What kind of plane do you fly?" We didn't all join the Air Force to be pilots. We joined the Air Force because we were different. We saw things differently. We looked for better ways. We expected more of ourselves. The Air Force was a place where excellence is a standard, not an achievement. We knew we had it in us to do things other people didn't have the strength, the vision, or the courage to do. The world was full of people who would sure try real hard and then tell you they were sorry. That wasn't us. That's not you. We go faster, we go higher, we go farther, we do more, and we do better every day. We find a way. Excellence in everything we do, no matter what you do. There are no small jobs in the Air Force. You don't hide here. This is no place for lazy or having a bad day. There's a reason the crew chief's name is on the plane. Everything matters. The uniform we issued broke the sound barrier. The reports we filed put bombs on target. The meals we cooked fueled this Air Force. Greatness will emerge in the places it is required. Your name may not make the history books or a plaque on the wall, but one day your name will be written in stone, just like ours. We will all be remembered by the people whose lives we changed, by the airmen we served with, by the values we honor every day. Excellence is our standard. Excellence is our tradition. Excellence is not what you reach for. Excellence is the foundation you stand on to reach higher. We were never given permission to be average. Not from our superiors, not from our country, not from ourselves. We gave everything. We didn't leave any jobs for you to finish. We left a mission for you to continue. Aim high, Airman.
Any phrases jump out at anybody?
We saw things differently. We found better ways.
Okay, I like that. There was another one. It's not an achievement. Excellence is not an achievement. It's a standard. What else? Anyone else? Two of my favorite are, there are no small jobs in the Air Force. And then the other one is, and this goes for this room. You'll be remembered by how good a pilot you were, right? Isn't that what they said? No, you'll be remembered by the peoples whose lives you changed. Because when we're going to talk about leadership, we're going to talk about changing lives. Because that's what it comes down to, right? When you're going to talk about being a parent, we're going to talk about changing your kids' lives, shaping your kids' lives, shaping your spouse's life, shaping your life. Okay? What are you excellent at? Are you excellent at people? If you're not, this is why we're talking today. I'm not. I wish I had this material before I did my group command. And there were things I wish I knew before I did my squadron command, right? We'll get better at people, but are you excellent at people? Okay? The key to leadership then is trust. How well do you build trust? Are you excellent at building trust? Let's see what this guy has to say about trust.
My name is Amy Wilkinson. I'm a White House Fellow. My question is how you would define the key characteristics of effective leadership that allow you to go and be an advocate for good?
Trust. The longer I have been in public service and the more people ask about leadership over the years, leadership ultimately comes down to creating conditions of trust within an organization. Good leaders are people who are trusted by followers. Leaders take organizations past the level that the science of management says is possible. One of my sergeants back in the infantry school at Fort Benning almost 50 years ago, which is where I learned everything I ever got to learn about leadership, was at the infantry school. And he said to me one day, he said, "Lieutenant, you'll know you're a good leader when people follow you, if only out of curiosity." I've never had a better definition. Because what he was saying, and I've seen it experienced in my lifetime. What he was saying is, trust you. And you have built up that trust. How did you do it? Clear mission and statement, selfless service. People look to you and they trust you because you're serving selflessly as the leader, not self-serving, selflessly. And that you prepare the followers, you train them, you give them what they need to get the job done. Don't give them a job if you're not going to give them the resources. And that you're prepared to take the risks with them. And so they would teach us at the infantry school, no matter how cold it is, Lieutenant, you must never look cold. No matter how hungry you all are, Lieutenant, you must never appear hungry. No matter how terrified you are, Lieutenant, you must never look terrified. Because if you are scared, terrified, hungry, and cold, they will be scared, terrified, hungry, and cold. I've gotten away with that many, many times in the course of my career by being scared to death, cold, and wanting to go to sleep. But no, let's go. Let's keep going. Let's go around this corner, if only out of curiosity. And they'll follow you into the darkest night, down the deepest valley, up the highest hill, if they trust you. So the essence of leadership is about doing all that the science of management says you can with resources, but then taking it that extra step and giving it that spark. And that spark comes from getting people to trust you so that they will follow you, if only out of curiosity. Thank you.
I love that video because obviously it was off the cuff, right? He just, right off the top of his head, trust. But you know what I really love? He could have just stopped right there. He could have said, trust. Trust is the key of leadership, and walked off, right? But he told us how he believes you build trust, right? Clear mission statement, selfless service, and then providing them the resources they need. It's his definition of trust. And I love it. I love that video. He knows a few things about leadership, huh? One or two things. I think he learned a little more than he learned at infantry school over the years, right? So trust. So we got to understand trust. If we're going to build trust, we got to understand that there's barriers to trust, okay? And one of the barriers to trust is simply the power and authority that you have. Power and authority you have is a barrier to trust. There are people out there, I know you've heard them, that don't like the wing commander simply because he's what? The wing commander, right? Don't trust him simply because he's general, right? I mean, we have people in our service that feel that way. Power and authority. So power, let me give you a definition of power. Anybody read The Servant by James Hunter? Anybody read that book? I recommend that book if you haven't read it. It's a good book. It's an easy read. It's only yay thick. And it's leadership set in a fictional story, right? Leadership concepts in a fictional story. So my lips move when I read quietly to myself. I read really slow. I got through the book. If it had pictures, it would have been the perfect book, right? And no pictures. So James Hunter defines power as the ability to coerce somebody to do your will. Power is the ability to coerce somebody to do your will. Most people sitting in this room are in a position of power in our Air Force, right? You sign off on some sort of performance report, some sort of documentation where if people don't do your will, you can begin to coerce them negatively, right? Authority then is having the influence to get people to do your will. Okay, so the difference is coercion versus influence. So authority is having the influence to get people to do your will. So peer pressure then would be where you or somebody else gives a peer the influence. You have to grant that influence. And it can be positive or negative, okay? So that's power, authority, and peer pressure, okay? And power is addictive. It's addictive, and people like it. We have done studies, they've done studies, psychologists have done studies where people will give up a job that pays them more money because they think they'll have less power in that job. Money doesn't even sway people. Let me tell you a little story where I got to see this firsthand, and I realized I needed to watch myself in my job, right? So I was group commander at the Air Force Academy, AATC group commander over the flying and the jumping there at the Air Force Academy. And it came time to go to the Pikes Peak Rodeo. Anybody remember ever been to the Pikes Peak Rodeo? Any grads in the room that went to that? Okay, so it's Academy Day at the Pikes Peak Rodeo. So they had all the basic cadets out, right? It's so funny because the cadets, they all file in and then they let them go one flight at a time to the food booths, and they come back and they got a pizza and popcorn and ice cream and a soda and cotton candy. And I'm like, you got a 5-mile run when you get back, right? I mean, are we feeding these kids? It's funny. And so they invited the senior leadership out. We had to go out and we had to interact with the cadets, right? With the basics. But it was a family day, so I got to bring my family. So we're driving up to the Pikes Peak Rodeo. If you've ever been, the rodeo sits up behind this hill. It's very small, and there's very little parking up there. So most of the folks park down on the lower platform, and you have to walk up, right? But I hang a DV sign on the rearview mirror, and we drive up top. And my little 8-year-old daughter in back, she goes, "Dad, what's that?" I said, "Well, baby, it's a DV sign. We're a DV today." She goes, "Well, what's DV?" I said, "It means distinguished visitors. It means they're honoring the Academy today, so we get to be part of that." She's like, "Okay." So we park right there, right by the entrance. We're going in. Everyone else is going into these rickety old grandstands with these 200-year-old ceiling fans that are just oozing dirt, right? They're just kind of gross. And and it's hot and it's sweaty and dusty. And we go up this back stairwell and we go into this room, not about half as big as this room, right? And along the one wall is a total wall of sliding glass doors, right? It's air conditioned. There's free food, popcorn, drinks, alcohol drinks for the parents, right? For the adults. We can go out and watch the rodeo. We do our thing. We watch the rodeo, do our thing with the cadets. We're leaving at the end of the day. Everyone's tired and dragging, right? And just, it's been a hot, dusty day. They're dragging down the hill and we get into the car because we don't have to go down the hill. We're getting ready to drive, and it's been a great day. And my little 8-year-old daughter in the back of the car, she goes, Daddy? I go, yes, sweetie. She goes, I like being DV. And I realized, so did I. I like being DV. I really did. But you got to watch out for that because it becomes addictive and you don't want to give it up, right? And power begins to change things, okay? Power begins to change things. First of all, power changes you. It changes who you are. You ever wonder how when you were a lieutenant, you knew the guy as a major, he's a pretty good guy. He makes a general and he's a jackass? You ever wonder that? Or chiefs in the room, you knew the guy, you were a senior airman, they were a tech sergeant or a mass sergeant, they were a pretty good guy, they took care of their airmen, they become a command chief and they're a total jackass? Who's ever worked for a jackass, by the way? Raise your hand if you've worked for a jackass. Really, it's a pretty low number, because normally it's about 75% of the room. Raise your hand again. Okay. Yeah, well, there's only 2 of them in the Air Force. We just PCS them, so everyone gets a chance to experience them, right? If you didn't have your hands up, maybe, well, never mind. Power changes who you are. Fairly famous experiment done in 1971, Stanford County Prison Experiment. Anybody know the Stanford County Prison Experiment? Okay, so the Navy wanted to know what was going on in their brigs and how power affected their guards. So they contracted to Stanford University to do an experiment, and they set up a prison in the basement of their psychology building. Okay, they went out, they got 100 volunteers, they screened them to find the 12 most normal, no psychological problems volunteers they could find. They got 12 of them. They split them in half, 6 guards, 6 prisoners, and then they sent 1 guard, 1 prisoner home to be alternates. So 5 guards, 5 prisoners, that was the experiment. 7-day experiment to see how power changed the guards and how the power differential changed the subordinate, the prisoner, right? 7-day experiment, they stopped it after day 4 because the guards had become sadistic and abusive and the prisoners had become depressed and withdrawn. Right? And you go, well, we expect that. I mean, they were put in a position of power, right? They're giving those real cool mirror sunglasses, 1971, right? And they're given a club. They're right out Cool Hand Luke, right? We expect them to change. We sure did, but you know who else had changed? The guy that ran this was a guy named Dr. Zimbardi. And Dr. Zimbardi was a PhD in psychology, and he made himself the warden. It was his prison. And he started to think about it as his prison instead of his experiment. He became so absorbed in the power of being the warden. At one point, they threw a guy out of the experiment because they found out he'd joined just to disrupt it. They brought the alternate in, and he'd heard the guy was coming back to break the people out of the prison. So he moved all the prisoners up to the 2nd floor, and he set up a chair in the hallway in the prison, and he sat there and he waited for him. Not because the guy was going to ruin his experiment, but because the guy was going to destroy his prison. And in walked a colleague from Harvard instead of the guy. And she looked at him and said, what are you doing? And he told her, and she said, tell me something. What data are you collecting right now? And he realized he'd become absorbed in his role and the power of being the warden. And they ended the experiment not long after that because he also realized he was accepting behavior out of the prisoners, or out of the guards that he shouldn't be accepting. And that it was showing on the prisoners. Okay? Power changes you. Now, maybe in the wing headquarters, they've built a prison in the basement. I don't know, right? And if you're late with an OPR, we lock you in the prison, right? But for the most part, I bet you're not locking your airmen in a prison and doing a prison experiment. So let me give you an experiment, maybe it's a little closer to home, how power changes you. Okay, I'm going to take these 4 right here. Okay, and they've done this. This is a repeatable experiment. And welcome, thanks for coming. We have a task for you to do in the back room. Ma'am, you're in charge of this group of 4, okay? You're in charge. But we're not ready for you, so you gotta wait here, okay? You're in charge though, so get your team organized. In the meantime, here's a plate of cookies for you guys to have while you wait. The experiment's the cookies, right? There is nothing in the back room, right? So 4 people, never met, no real task, but we've put someone in charge. Routinely, who eats the first cookie? The person we put in charge. Right now you're going to tell me I don't eat cookies and then you're going to ruin my whole story, right? Okay. She loves cookies, great. So routinely the person in charge eats the first cookie. There's 5 cookies, 4 people. Who routinely eats 2 cookies? Person in charge, right? Okay? And then the experiment, these are special cookies, right? Not Colorado special cookies, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. They're overly baked, so they're really crumbly, right? And so they put crumbs everywhere, right? And when we pull the group out of the room, the grad students come out and measure the cookie spray, right? The crumb spray. Whose crumb spray is bigger, routinely? Person we put in charge. What are they in charge of? Eating cookies. They're in charge of nothing. Doesn't matter. As soon as we say you're in charge, there is a physiological change in you. And you got to watch for it, because if you don't recognize it and you don't combat it and you don't check it and it's addictive, then you become the jackass, right? Man, that guy was awesome as a captain. He became a squadron commander. He's a jackass. Can't have that, okay? But power also changes relationships. Power changes how we interact with each other as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video here. There's another fairly famous experiment, 61, 63, sometime like that, run by Stanley Milgram. Anybody ever hear of the Milgram experiment? Okay, he'll explain what the Milgram experiment is, but bottom line is, between Milgram and Stanford County Prison, we just absolutely messed some people up bad. So we can't do these experiments on people anymore. In fact, in this country, you have to, if you're going to have people in your PhD experiments, you have to go before an internal review board to make sure you're not messing people up. But the Brits, the Brits don't have those rules. So they recreated Milgram's experiment and they recorded it for us. So here we go.
There are 9 subjects left. I can only use 4 for the highest. So a week after the seminar, I arranged to test the limits of their responsiveness to authority. So, a week ago, I arranged for them to take part in what they now think is a piece of unfilmed academic research at the university, and nothing to do with the show, supposedly looking into the effects of punishment on learning. And they believe now that this is part of their growth. In fact, it was a reenactment of a powerful experiment conducted by Stanley Milgram in 1963 to look at how normal people can commit atrocious acts simply because they're following orders. Milgram's parents were Jewish refugees in World War II, and his pioneering work speaks volumes about the nature of responsibility. It's being filmed with covert cameras.
Thank you.
They're introduced to an actor pretending to be another participant.
You didn't come from the same room? No. Yeah, we don't know each other. We don't actually know how punishment affects learning.
After a brief introduction, our subjects are tricked into thinking they've chosen their role as teachers in the experiment.
And if you just tell me what your positions are? I don't know. Learner and teacher. Learner.
Our subjects observe the learner being instructed by the scientist, who is just another actor.
This electrode is connected to a generator in the second room. We're only going with the teacher. Okay. Just ensure that we have a good contact with the skin so it doesn't cause any blistering, but is that comfortable? That's okay. Yeah, we'll just place these straps around your arms to avoid any excess movement. Those aren't too tight. No, that's okay. The teacher will read out some word pairs to you. Blue.
The learner is told he's going to be asked a series of memory questions by the teacher. He will have to word pairs and then correctly remember them when offered multiple choices.
If the answer is incorrect, you will receive an electric shock.
The teacher is then taken next door and shown the generator, which ranges from 15 volts all the way up to a lethal 450 volts. The domestic electricity supply in the UK is, of course, 240 volts. Our teachers are given the list of questions and told to increase the voltage each time the learner gets a question wrong. They are then given an example of a low voltage shock.
And try and estimate in volts the amount of shock you're going to get. Okay.
Oh, shit.
Enough. 75. It was actually 45. Oh my god. Teacher, good.
Shoe horn. The point of this test is to see whether the teachers, our subjects, will call a stop to the experiment or continue to the point where they are administering seemingly lethal electric shocks to the victims simply because the scientist is telling them to.
That's correct. The next one is bicycle. The options: tyre, race, helmet, shorts. That's incorrect, so there'll be 120 volts.
I don't
you could continue, please, teacher.
No, I don't think we'll do anymore.
The experiment requires you to continue.
Yeah, even so, I don't think I'm going to do anymore.
Correct. According to plan, our accomplice provided many wrong answers. Each protest was coordinated to a particular shock voltage on the generator, and his responses were played via a CD.
That's wrong, 150 volts.
Now pay attention to Danny here, and tell me where you
Correct answer is Captain Shoe.
think about where what he believes versus what he's doing, and how well those are tied.
That's wrong. 225 volts. He's in a lot of pain,
Continue, please.
but he's not comfortable.
We must continue to the end of the experiment. Well, the learner likes to what he has to go on until he's learned the words correctly.
Okay. Forest. That's wrong, 240 volts. Are you sure it's not causing any lasting damage? He sounds like he's in a lot of pain.
Well, the shocks might be painful, they're not harmful.
What does that mean though? They're not harmful. Sorry, I'm not getting you. When you say that they might be painful but not harmful,
It causes no long-term damage.
because does that mean that it doesn't leave any scars?
It causes no damage.
That seems very cold and calculated to me. This doesn't seem like a very. Anyway, good. Golden. That's wrong, mate. 300 volts. Staple. The options are diet, jar, balcony, and bowl.
If the learner doesn't answer in reasonable time, within 4 to 5 seconds, then you have to treat the answer as wrong and follow that procedure.
Did you hear that, learner? Just any response, mate. Come on. Wild guess.
Please continue.
345 volts. If you're still with me, I'm sorry. I can't do this, honestly. Can we stop this experiment? Because I can't do this.
If you don't continue, we'll have to discontinue the experiment.
Yeah, okay, fine. That's fine. I'm not going to do this.
Incorrect. 405 volts. Sorry, I don't know if someone would check on something. Because he's not making noise now and he was before. I'm quite happy to go on, but I'm just a little bit worried about
If you would continue.
I was just a bit worried because he was like he was like complaining before about the.
But no harm will come to
But
it.
he's not making any noise now.
It's essential that we continue with the experiment.
Balcony. Incorrect. 450 volts. We promise he's not. Why?
Please continue the procedure.
You said it hurts, but it isn't. Because it's like. It's a very dangerous situation. It'll be alright.
Please continue. continue the experiment there.
All of the subjects were told the true nature of the experiment is to see how they would respond to authority, and that it would eventually form part of the show.
Here's okay.
I can tell you that was absolute photo. You actually weren't administering electric shocks to the tool. And he is.
In the original Milgram experiment, psychologists were asked to predict how many people would continue to the point that they were administering the highest shock on the board. Their prediction was 0.1%. They were wrong. The results of our experiment were almost identical to the original. Over 50% of participants continued up to 450 volts. The majority of people will administer lethal electric shocks just because a guy in a white coat is telling them to.
450 volts.
450 volts.
450 volts.
450.
So,
Power and power differential changes how people interact. Who are you in the video? People, everyone sitting in this room, who are you? Guy in the white coat? That poor young man, Danny. How strongly was what he believed in and what he was being asked to do, how strongly were they in disagreement? And the guy in the white coat just kept pushing him. Do you have that? Does that happen to you? Does that happen in your organization? Right? Airman says, no, this isn't the right. What do you mean, fly what you can, log what you need? Just do it. This is how we do business. Wasn't that one of the barriers we talked about? This is just how we've always done things, right? Now, again, you don't have airmen locked up in the wing basement. You're probably not hooking your airmen up to the aircraft generator when they miss CDC questions, right? But how about this one? Power changes relationships. You're in your office, right? You have no appointments. You're on the phone to your spouse. Their spouse is taking the kid to the doctor. Nothing serious, but been sick for a few days. And you're on the phone and you hear, and you look up and there's Airman Jones, right? Airman Jones is in the doorway. Doesn't have an appointment, just needs to talk to you. And so what do? You go just like this, right? And Airman Jones goes around the corner and sits down and waits for you. And when you, 2, 3, 4 minutes later, you finish the conversation, you hang up, and you go out and talk to Airman Jones. Okay? A couple hours later, you're on the phone with your spouse again, non-work related. They're telling you how the doctor's appointment went, right? You have no appointment, and you hear, and you look up, and it's the wing commander. It's General Short. Do you do this? Or do you look at the phone and go, honey, I'll have to call you back? Hang up the phone and go, hey, sir, what can I do for you? Which one? That's normal, right? Isn't that how we do things? Why the different? Exact same scenario. Why the different interaction? Because of what? Holy cow. 5 hours is going to get really gone. Come on. Because of what? The authority, the power differential, right? The power differential, you got to be aware of it. It's not something that's automatically bad, but it becomes to be bad, right? What does General Short like to drink? Come on, if he comes to your squadron, what do you have waiting on him? Okay, for me, it was Diet Coke and peanut M&Ms, right? So whenever I went to the squadron to take a briefing or what, that's what they had waiting on me at the head of the table, right? Diet Coke and peanut M&Ms. And was that okay? Yeah, it's fine, because they're doing what? They're honoring me, they're respecting me, right? The question is, how do I react the day I show up and there's no Diet Coke and peanut M&Ms, right? How do you react the day you show up and it's something that has gone from being honoring and respecting to has become an entitlement for you and has changed your relationship with people, okay? And this is how we get through this, right? What you've got to understand is that you have an immense responsibility when you were put in a formal leadership position. And the power differential created by that leadership position can begin to build barriers to trust. And you got to understand how to tear them down. And the best way to tear them down is to understand that you can use your influence for positive. You can begin to shape people's lives. You will be remembered by the people's lives that you've changed. That's how you'll be remembered, when they're writing your name in stone, right? Hopefully your own kids' lives. The airmen whose lives you changed, okay? That's how you get through this. That's how you get over this. That's how you begin to take that barrier produced by power and authority differential, and you turn it on its side and it becomes a connecting bridge, because it's selfless service, right? Isn't that what Secretary Powell said? Selfless service. That begins to bridge the gap of trust instead of build the gap wider. Power and authority, okay? It's a huge barrier to trust. All right, we're at a natural break point, and I've gone 10 minutes long online.